And now I am excited to introduce today's speaker. Today's speaker is Cindy. She is a master gardener and has been one for 13 years. Cindy has year-round vegetable beds, gardens devoted to bees and butterflies, 5 beehives, 6 chickens, a worm bin, and 6 compost bins. Her yard is a Monarch way station, a certified butterfly garden, a certified wildlife habitat, and a certified bee-friendly garden. Wow, that's amazing. And now I'm going to hand things off to Cindy for tonight's talk.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Yes, I'm excited to be here, and today, believe it or not, is World Bee Day. So it's a perfect day to have this particular talk. Let me just tell you a little bit about the Master Gardeners. We're volunteers that have been trained and certified by the University of California system as part of their extension services. And our goal is to provide science-based information to backyard gardeners for their vegetable and flower gardens, trees, fruit trees, whatever, and to their local communities. So we're available to answer questions and help with all kinds of gardening situations. We provide lots of talks and workshops where we help to educate people. So let's get started for today. We're going to be talking about gardening for bees and butterflies. So first of all, who do we want to attract? Well, we're going to talk about bees, butterflies, and I'm going to throw in hummingbirds too, because they're also part of this habitat. And one of the first things you do when you decide what you want to attract or not attract, conversely, to your yard, you need to think about what are their life cycles, what do they do, how do they reproduce, and what are their habitat requirements. There are 4 basic wildlife needs, and this is for any wildlife that you might want to encourage or discourage from your yard, and that is food, water, cover, and space. So food and water, a place to raise their young, and a place to hide if they need to, or to protect themselves. So this is the background. This is where we're going to go from, is kind of the science-based, what do they need to come to your yard? What will make them want to come to your yard? Let's talk about bees first. There are over 1,600 species of native California bees. Most of them are solitary nesters. It means they're just one little bee all by herself, and they're non-aggressive. European bees are the only ones that live in large hives and defend them. Obviously, the Western or European honeybee is not native, but it is present worldwide. It's the most common honeybee there is. There were no honeybees in North or South America before the Europeans arrived. The honeybee has a black and slightly a little bit of yellow on it, but mainly a black striped body, and is kind of plump, not real fat, but not real skinny either. As I said, it's one species worldwide, which is kind of unusual. And it has a year-round season, which means that the hive continues to grow year-round. Even where it snows and it's very cold, they will hunker down together and they will stay together as a unit. Every hive has a queen, it has workers, and it has drones. The workers are the only ones that forage in the garden. The queen and the drones do not. They have domesticated themselves, though, from hives that have gotten loose from beekeepers, and they nest in large cavities in trees, in the ground, or in buildings. We had some in our roof for a while, or in hive boxes. They don't have a preferred flower other than that they're broad nectar and pollen generalists. They're looking for nectar and pollen. Now the queen, in the springtime, when the hive is very small, there'll be a small core number of bees in that hive. Then as the nectar starts coming in and it starts getting warmer, she starts laying more and more eggs every day. She can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. And she will build up the quantity of worker bees that she has in the hive until midsummer or so. And then as the nectar flow starts to drop off, she'll begin to lay fewer and fewer eggs so that there'll be a small core of worker bees that will live with her through the winter. There are some drones around at all times. They're kind of freeloaders, and the worker bees will generally kick them out of the hive in the fall before they start to wind down things for the season. Bees can go as far as 5 miles looking for nectar, so they can range quite a ways away from their original hive. Now, native bees. We have 4,000 species that are native to the US and 1,600 that are native to California. Of those 1,600 species, 26 are bumblebees and the remainder are solitary bees. That means one bee lives all by herself. So I'm going to talk today about 3 different cousins, if you will, to the honeybee out of the 1,600 we have in California, just to give you an idea of how they live and how different they can be. Digger bees. We have 40 species of digger bees in California, and the seasons are fairly short. Depending upon the species and where in California they are, the season is kind of March to June or May to October. The rest of the year, they're hibernating. And if it sounds like that's kind of a short season, March to June would be spring flowers, and May to October would be gardens that have summer nectar. They're generally produce 1 or 2 generations a year. That means they lay the eggs, they develop, the bees then go out and mate, and they then in turn lay a second generation. They're solitary, so they have no hives. They're just one bee all by herself, and they nest either in flat, bare ground or in the vertical banks of like creeks where there's dirt banks, and they'll drill into the dirt to lay their eggs. She'll go off and she'll collect nectar and pollen. She'll lay an egg, and then she'll seal up the hole with the nectar and pollen, so it'll be there to feed the larvae after it hatches. Then she'll lay another egg in there and cover it, and then another egg as she backs out of the hole that she's created. Then when they actually hatch and the larvae then become bees, the first bees out of the run, which were the last ones laid, will always be drones. So they'll be waiting outside that nest as the females come out of the nest, and then they're mated, and then the drones take off. And because the drones don't do any foraging on their own, they don't live very long, but the females that do then will go off and find another place for that new queen to have a nest, and she'll dig a hole to start. On the left here is an example of a carpenter bee that will either use a pithy stem or soft wood to go into, and you can see she's carrying in a leaf to help seal off each individual egg as she lays them. The middle one is a digger bee, and you can see her coming out of the ground and pushing the dirt out. The picture on the right shows the outside of a nest where the bee has pushed the dirt up out of the ground and made a little mound. You'll often see, if it's a really good area, you'll see a number of holes in the ground. There might be a dozen or two holes all in the same area, but each of these bees are operating independently. They're not helping each other out or working together in any way. Ground nesters need a clear or weedy dirt area to dig in the ground to be able to lay their eggs. So when you mulch, you should be sure and leave some areas that are not mulched so the bees can have a place to nest. Also, if you find an area like this, you might want to make sure that you don't spray anything nearby, and also, keep digging animals away from there, like dogs and cats and things like that might disrupt their nests. I want to also point out the picture in the middle of the digger bee. You notice that she doesn't have any yellow on her. Another insect that nests in the ground is a yellow jacket, and it would be mostly yellow with a little bit of black. Also, if it were a yellow jacket hole, you would see numerous bees flying in and out of the same hole, whereas with a digger bee, it'll only be one bee per hole, and that's it. So that's how you can distinguish between a ground dwelling, a ground nesting bee, and yellow jackets. Two different things. Okay, carpenter bees. We have 3 species in California. Their season is year-round, but the peak is March to August, which is the same as most of our flowering plants in California. They're solitary again, and they're long-lived. They can actually live for a couple of years, and so once they've drilled a nest or found a nest, they'll return to that nest over and over again. As you can see in the picture, she's very shiny. Very black, and she's kind of round. She's very fat. We have carpenter bees. We've had them for 30 years in the framework that holds up our solar for our swimming pool. And there's always a fine layer of sawdust underneath there as they drill the holes into the wood so they can lay their nest. Unfortunately, right next to it is a gate that goes into our backyard. And when we go through the gate, especially this time of year, they come out, particularly the males, which have no stingers whatsoever, will come out and fly around your head like they're trying to chase you off. But they have no stingers, so they really can't do anything other than try to intimidate you. But they're kind of fat and big, and if they catch you by surprise, they are kind of intimidating. Bumblebees. Bumblebees are a very interesting species. We have 26 different kinds in California, and they range dramatically in size. These are annual colonies. They're not actually hives, and they're present most of the flowering season. They're not hives in that they don't accumulate honey, they don't store honey, and they don't live over from year to year. They're annual colonies. Now, they again they do though, however, have a queen, a worker, and drones. In this case, however, they all forage. They all go out and visit flowers. Now, the queen will wake up in the springtime by herself. She'll be very hungry, and she will go out, and first thing she'll do is she'll feed herself. She'll make sure she gets her strength up. She'll collect nectar and pollen and get well fed, and then she will start looking for a place for a nest. She'll be looking for an abandoned rodent burrow or abandoned bird nest, particularly in cavities in trees. And then she'll start to get to work. The first thing she'll do is she's going to collect pollen, and she's going to collect nectar. And she's going to create a little cup out of the pollen and fill it full of nectar. Then she goes out and she collects more pollen and more nectar, and she'll begin to build a ball. And then she'll lay some eggs on top of that ball, and then she will sit on that ball and keep it warm, just like birds do. She's going to incubate those eggs. Meanwhile, she drinks nectar out of that cup of nectar that she prepared ahead of time so that she has something to eat while she's waiting. After her eggs hatch and the larvae become bees, bumblebees, and now she has some workers to help her. So she won't forage anymore after that. She will stay there and lay eggs, and the workers will help her by helping her to feed and raise the eggs, and also they will go out and forage and bring in more pollen and more nectar to feed the growing family. Toward the end of the summer, the queen will lay some eggs that will become future queens, and she'll also lay some drones. So then the drones and the new queens will mate. The new queens will go off individually and hide someplace for the winter, under leaves or in a small hole or someplace all by themselves. Meanwhile, this year's queen and her workers and the drones all die off. So they're only good for 1 year, and then they're gone. And next year's queens are waiting for the next springtime for them to come out and get busy. This is what a bumblebee looks like. They're usually pretty furry looking. Some have more or less yellow on them. Some are very furry. There's actually one that's called the teddy bear bumblebee because he's so fat and furry. She's so fat and furry. But they're not aggressive at all toward people. Okay, now we're going to talk about butterflies. Here are some pictures of butterflies that are native to the Bay Area, starting with the monarch butterfly on the left, which I believe is the largest butterfly that we have in the region. They can get up to 4 inches across. Here are some more butterflies that are native to the Bay Area. The one in the top row that's blue, that's a mission blue, and it's one of the smallest butterflies that we have in this area. So there are 20,000 species of butterflies worldwide. Most of those are in the tropics. We do have 575 species in the US and about 150 species that are native to the Bay Area. Many of them are year-round, and there are a number that migrate, and there are also others that just stay in a local area. We have the highest density of endangered species in the US, mainly because of the habitat loss in this area. But one person, you, can make a difference in their life. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So there's one big key to attracting butterflies to your garden. And that is to understand that each species has a preferred host plant. Eggs are laid only on the host plant, and that's the only food for that caterpillar. Adult butterflies are less picky. Almost any nectar-producing plant will feed them. They prefer plants that are flat-topped, makes it easy for them to land on it, and easier for them to nectar. If you really want butterflies in your garden, you've got to include the host plant and plenty of it for the caterpillars. Okay, so let's talk about monarch butterflies first. Their name is Greek for sleeping transformation, which is the amazing thing about butterflies. Okay, so the female butterfly lays an egg, and in 3 to 5 days, it will hatch, and that kind of depends upon the weather. The warmer and more humid the weather is, the shorter the incubation time. Then it goes into larvae stage, and during this time, it's usually a week to 2 weeks when they're in the larvae stage. Monarchs go through 5 transformations, 5 molts, as instars. They grow a whole bunch, then they break open their skin, they shed their skin, then they grow some more, shed their skin again 5 times in 14 days. Then they develop a chrysalis, and again, that usually takes a week to 2 weeks depending upon the weather. And after that, you then have the adult butterfly, which lives 2 to 6 weeks. Monarchs also migrate. So after when they begin their spring migration, they'll either be coming from Mexico up into the central and east part of the United States, or they'll be coming from the coast or Mexico up into the Sierras, and then as far north as the state of Washington and into Canada. Here's what a monarch egg looks like. You can see compared to the pencil that they're very small, and the butterfly will lay 1 egg at a time. She deposits 1 at a time, although you may see a couple on the same leaf because either the same butterfly laid it twice or another butterfly came along behind her. This is what a monarch egg looks like under a telescope. Isn't it lovely? I think it's kind of wild, but that's what it looks like up close. So it's a tough life for monarch butterflies. Eggs are only laid on milkweed. The less milkweed there is, the less eggs that are laid. Of the eggs that are laid, less than 5% of them survive to adulthood. Their habitat is disappearing, and they are becoming increasingly endangered. And in fact, the government agency did a study in 2016 and decided that they would be declared in danger in 2019. That didn't happen. And finally, last year in December of 2020, they came out and said that the monarch butterfly should be considered endangered, but because there were other animals that also were endangered and were in potentially worse shape than the monarch butterflies, they didn't have enough resources to declare them all endangered. Now, this is despite the fact that in 2018, we had about 30,000 monarch butterflies that were overwintering along the coast of California in trees and habitats where they've been wintering for years. In December of 2020, there were only 2,000. So in 2 years, they went from 30,000 overwintering to 2,000. But apparently that wasn't good enough to make them be declared endangered. So we need to have people step up and do some more things, particularly to help out our monarchs and also to help out other butterflies. So here's the 5 stages that a monarch caterpillar will go through in about 2 weeks. And you can see, number 1 down here is what it looks like after it emerges from the egg. And then 2, 3, 4, 5. How would you like to grow that much in 2 weeks? Thankfully, we don't. Notice that as they get a little bit bigger, you can see that they are striped. And this is what the monarch caterpillars look like. They're black and white and yellow striped, so that you can identify them when you see them in your garden. Now, at, at the end of this period, when they're nice and fat and happy, the caterpillar is going to go and spin some silk and attach herself. You can see here, attach herself to a twig or something that she can hang from. She's going to hang in this J for about 24 to 48 hours. And she'll just hang there and she won't look like she's doing anything. Then she's going to get more limp and her antenna will be very limp and she'll kind of elongate herself like that. Then in a matter of about 2 minutes, she's going to go from here to the chrysalis. It takes about 2 minutes for this transformation to take place. So unless you're watching real close, you're not going to see it. The chrysalis of a monarch butterfly is green with a little bit of like gold stripes and sometimes little gold dots on it. It will be hanging from under something. More than likely, it will not be hanging on a milkweed plant. They'll move off of the milkweed plant when they're getting ready to create a chrysalis. So they'll move to patio furniture, pots, other plants, trees, bushes, other places where they can hide and create their chrysalis. So the host plant for the monarch is milkweed. No milkweed, no monarchs. We have over 100 varieties of milkweed that are native to the US and 16 that are native to California. They grow in many environments and many climates. So there's lots of choices for milkweed that you can grow in your garden. I'm going to show you some pictures of some later and you'll see how lovely they are. So let's talk about swallowtails for a minute. This is a Western tiger swallowtail. They're also a large butterfly. They're one of the largest that we have in the Bay Area. They're 3 to 4 inches apart. They're not endangered. You're going to see them from February to October. They're going to hibernate the rest of the year. For us along the coast, we'll probably see 2 to 4 generations. So they're going to lay that many generations as they move out of the Bay Area or through the Bay Area in their lifetime. This is what the caterpillar of a Western tiger swallowtail looks like. Kind of alarming if you get startled. You might get startled by it if you didn't know what it was. And this is what their chrysalis looks like. You can notice there's an attachment here. There's a tether line that they attach to in addition to the silk that they put on the end here to attach themselves. And you notice that it could look just like a dry leaf. So one of the reasons that many gardeners recommend that you do not cut down and prune your plants in the fall is because if you do, you're likely to gather up and throw away a lot of these chrysalis that are waiting there for the winter to come out of diapause in the spring. So this is what a Western tiger swallowtail chrysalis looks like. Host plants for the Western tiger swallowtail are trees: sycamore, ash, willow, lilac, cherry, privet, cottonwoods. All of these are really pretty big trees. So unless you have a large yard, you're probably not going to plant one of these in your yard. But if you're on the committee to plant plants for your city's park, you might want to suggest one of the trees on this list because it would be a host plant and would be valuable. And if you have no neighbors or people who actually have some of these trees, I would encourage them not to cut them down. Okay, Anna's swallowtail is a little bit smaller, very pretty swallowtail, very common around here. She grows about 3 inches apart. Again, February to October is when we see them, and 2 to 4 generations. These, however, may hibernate for months or years. So then more than just the October to February diapause, Some of them actually can stay in hibernation for several years. There are a number of people who raise butterflies online, and particularly some that specialize in swallowtails, and they'll talk about swallowtails that are 2 or 3 years old that they've been keeping that are now emerging. So it's kind of amazing. This is what the caterpillar of an anise swallowtail looks like. Kind of scary looking, if you ask me. And this is what the chrysalis looks like. Again, there's a tether, but it looks like dried leaves or something that's just stuck to the plant. The host plants for an swallowtail are, as you might imagine, anise, which is fennel. I noticed that last summer we had a lot of anise swallowtails around, and I think it was because we had a lot of anise growing. It was a mild winter, and we did have enough rain that the wild fennel grew. There was a lot of wild fennel everywhere, and I think that really helped out our swallowtail population last year. They also like other members of the same family, which includes dill, parsley, carrots, celery, parsnips, and things like that grow in your vegetable garden. They also will grow on citrus like lemons and oranges. So again, you don't want to spray those either. Now this is a very beautiful pipevine swallowtail. They're blue. They come in kind of various shades of blue. This is the underside of their wings. They're very lovely. They're also about a 3-inch in size. They go through 1 to 2 generations per year, February to October. And again, their diapause may last months or years, and they're very active in certain areas of Northern California. There are a lot of them that live up in the Redding, Shasta area of Northern California, where the pipevines grow very well. They grow along creek banks and places like that. There are lots of pipevine swallowtails up there. And they used to be very active in the Bay Area. I'd like to have you meet Tim Wong. This is one person who's done a lot to save butterflies. And this is an example that he can set for all of us that we can also help. Tim is an aquatic biologist with the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. He's lived in San Francisco all of his life, and he remembers as a young boy seeing these beautiful blue butterflies in San Francisco, which he didn't see anymore, and he didn't know why. And occasionally he might see 1 or 2, but they were not very common anymore. So he went out and he set up a butterfly shelter. And this is all screened in. He got pipevine, California pipevine, they grew in there, along with lots of different nectar plants. And he was able to get some eggs, and he raised pipevine butterflies in this shelter so he could learn more about their life cycle and about what he could do to help propagate them in San Francisco and San Mateo County. The pipevine swallowtail lays clusters of eggs. Instead of laying them one at a time like some of the other butterflies do, she lays a whole cluster at one time. This is what the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar looks like, black and red. And they also tend to cluster together as caterpillars. Again, unlike some of the other butterflies that are more solitary. And you can see this is a pipevine here. This is California pipevine. This is what the chrysalis look like of pipevines. Again, they cluster together because that's what Pipevine Swallowtails do. And you can see they're very pretty, but again, they would look like just leaves that have curled up, and you'd cut them off and throw them in the green bin. This is what the California pipevine looks like. It's also called Dutchman's pipe. It looks like a Dutch pipe here. It's not the easiest plant to grow. It grows kind of slowly in our area here. I have a couple of plants that I've been babying for a while, but I'm hoping that mine will start to take off this summer. They seem to be growing really well this spring. I'm hoping that I'm going to attract a few. Tim has now collected enough eggs. He's given them to the Botanical Society in San Francisco. They raise pipevine there, and if you go there in the summertime, you'll see signs along the pathway that says, watch out for caterpillars, because they crawl across the ground and they're all around the area. But you can see them live in person if you go to the botanical gardens. And I hope to see them in San Mateo County soon. Okay, a couple more here just really quickly. This is a West Coast lady, very common butterfly, about 2 inches apart, couple generations a year for us. She has a very woolly looking caterpillar. Some caterpillars that are woolly like this can be very painful if you touch them. So I've never touched one from West Coast lady, but I'd be very careful if I did. Host plants for West Coast ladies are hollyhocks and the mallow family. Cabbage whites. Everybody's seen a cabbage white. They're all over, very ubiquitous. They're usually 1 to 2 inches. They're one of the first butterflies to emerge in the springtime, and will have multiple generations along the coast. Their caterpillars can look like this, either be black and yellow, or they can be all green, and look like, people call them cabbage loopers as well. They like plants like cleome. They like vegetable garden plants like mustards, cabbage, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, all that family. They're fond of. Conversely, if you don't want cabbage whites in your vegetable garden, I would recommend that you cover your broccoli and cabbage with floating row covers so that you keep out the caterpillars. And so this is part of understanding what a habitat is and what these insects and animals need to be provided. And if something is not eating your plants, then you can probably conclude that your garden is not part of the ecosystem. And you may want to work on that. So quick little through hummingbirds here. So we'll talk about what hummingbirds need. Allens are common only in California. They're especially concentrated in the Bay Area, and they have a green beak. Most of our hummingbirds migrate either from Southern California or from Mexico, and they again will migrate all the way to Washington. So they're fast little flyers. They can fly 500 miles at a clip, and they can cover great distance. There are other hummingbirds that do not migrate, and we have a special concentration here in the Bay Area. So we have a number of different kinds of hummingbirds that are with us mostly year round. Come on, and they do. So no. All right, try this again. Aha. Okay, black-chinned hummingbird. This is the most common hummingbird in the Western United States, and it's found throughout California. Hummingbirds are native only to North and South America, and they go everywhere from deserts to up to 10,000 feet up into the high mountains and the Alps and the Sierras. Annas, the greatest consumers of insects of all hummers. They're very, very common in California, especially in the South, and they sing more than any other hummingbirds do. Hummingbirds are extremely unique. They're the only bird that can fly forward, backward, upside down, and hover. And they can hover longer in one place than any other bird. Hummingbirds cannot walk, and they cannot hop. They can hang on to a branch like this one does here, and they can scooch a little bit, but they can't actually walk or hop. The female will build the nest and raise her 2 eggs all by herself, and she's very protective. And they go into trees and bushes that are kind of thick and bushy, and they fly in, and you can hardly see them. Okay, so hummingbird favorites particularly like plants that have a long throat. So trumpet vine, fuchsias, lantanas are all some of the plants they like. Columbine is a native, so are salvias, and so is California fuchsias. Those are all native plants if you want to concentrate on native plants for your garden. Hollyhocks and delphiniums are also favorites that they have. Multi-purpose favorite, the hummingbird, are spiders. Hummingbirds eat insects for protein. We're all well familiar with the fact that hummingbirds eat nectar out of feeders, but actually 80% of their diet is insects. They need that protein to be able to fuel themselves and to make those muscles work in their wings. They can catch insects in mid-flight. I watch them over my lawn, just come along and snatch them right out of the air. They eat insects right out of a spider web, including the spider, and they use the web for building their nests and attaching it to trees and shrubs. They'll actually go into a spider web and wrap the spider web around their beak and then fly to where they're building the nest. And they use downy material, sometimes the soft down from flowers or inside of like milkweed, they'll use to build a nest. They cover the outside of it with licithin, so it looks like it's been there forever, and it's kind of melds in with the tree and looks like the tree. But the nest, I wish I could do this in person because I have some that I can pass around. They're little tiny nests. But they're actually expandable because they're made with the web. They can get bigger and they can get smaller, and so that as the eggs hatch and the birds grow, the nest can actually expand without having to be rebuilt. Hummingbirds, as we all know, like nectar. And here are some pictures of bird feeders. There's all kinds of choices that you can do. By the way, that bird in the upper left-hand picture is not a hummingbird. That's an oriole, but they like feeders too. The simple, you do not need to buy hummingbird feeder or nectar. You can make it yourself with 1 part sugar to 4 parts water. So 1 cup to 4 cups, or 1/4 cup to 1 cup, whatever the ratio would be, 1 to 4. Do not use food coloring in there. It's not necessary. Don't worry, they'll find the nectar all by themselves. They don't need that. And the dye, the red dye, is not good for them. So that's a little bit about some of the basics of what bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds need in their life and how they live. And so now we're going to talk about some specifics for your garden. Number 1, no pesticides. Pesticides kill very well. They kill bees, butterflies, caterpillars, and all kinds of beneficial insects and other pollinators. They're not necessary. And this includes safe or organic pesticides like BT insecticidal soap, dormant oil spray, spinosad, and pyrethrin. Yes, they're safe safe for you, not for bees, butterflies, or other pollinators. So you're best off not using any of these at all in your garden and relying upon the beneficial bugs to come in and take care of those for you. And again, hummingbirds really, really, really need those spiders in your garden, so we don't want you spraying for those either. If you have to spray one of these safe or organic pesticides, be sure you do it as close to sundown as you can after the bees have gone back into their nests, and give it some time for it to dry up before the next day. And please, please, no neonicotinoids. These are the most widely used insecticides in the world. They've now been banned in the EU because they are a systemic pesticide, which means that whether it goes in through the leaves or whether it goes in through the roots, it goes in both ways. It is present in the leaves, in the flowers, in the nectar, in the roots, in every part of the plant now has neonicotinoids in it. It's long-lived. It can persist in the environment for months or years. It's water soluble, so it can be taken up by nearby plants that you don't even intend to spray. And it can contaminate our watershed, and it can poison ground-dwelling bees. So it is a systemic. It stays in the plant forever and ever. There's no way you can wash it out. You cannot, water it enough, and it lasts for a long time. They're really, really bad for these butterflies and hummingbirds. This is a tag that Home Depot puts on plants that they sell that have been sprayed with neonicotinoids. And you can see here it's very helpful. It says, this plant is protected from aphid, whiteflies, beetles, and mealybugs. Well, that sounds pretty good. I mean, nobody wants aphids, whiteflies, or mealybugs in their garden. But on the back of it, it says it's been treated with neonicotinoids. And so this means that this cannot be used in your butterfly garden because it's going to kill your butterflies and your bees. Home Depot, to their benefit, has reduced as many plants as they can get from their suppliers. And they say that supposedly all of the plants that they do sell that have been sprayed with neonicotinoids have this plant marker on them. So supposedly at Home Depot, you can tell. Other big box stores, I know they don't provide this kind of tagging, so you can't tell. Even nurseries often don't have any idea whether their suppliers supply with neonicotinoids or not, which is why in some cases, you want to buy from people who don't spray. There's a couple of brands, Bloom's brand and also Bonnie Plants do not spray any of their plants that they sell. They sell those through Home Depot. They also sell them through other nurseries. They have never been sprayed. Other than that, you have to ask, have these plants, particularly if you're looking for butterfly plants, have they been sprayed with neonicotinoids? Good bugs know how to find the bad bugs. Can't send out a distress signal when they're attacked. The poop of the bad bugs is also a lure to good bugs. And if you allow nature to claim your garden, you'll have ladybugs coming in to eat the aphids and other good bugs that'll come in and take care of some of the other things. And birds need them. Birds very much need these to feed their fledglings, particularly in the springtime. I just read something today that said that chickadees, a pair of chickadees, will need somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars in order to feed their clutch of fledglings before they fledge and fly off. So that's a lot of caterpillars. Number 2, you want bees and butterflies, ditch the lawn. Lawns use a huge amount of water. This is probably not a good year to put in a lawn if you don't already have one. If you don't compost, then you're adding to the landfill with all that grass. You get to sleep in. You don't have to mow if you don't have a lawn. And unless you have lots and lots and lots of dandelions, your pollinators aren't going to be interested at all. This is not a pollinator-friendly garden. This is a pollinator-friendly garden. You can see lots of different things, lots of colors, lots of variety for pollinators. This is a pollinator-friendly garden. This is a very small garden. It only actually has 5 different plants in there, but you can see it has a bunch of each of the different plants. This is a pollinator garden. All of these plants in this garden, by the way, are very pollinator friendly. You could have a container pollinator garden. You could have a single container that could be a pollinator garden. You just have to pick the right plants. Number 3, plant for all seasons. Pollen and nectar are needed from early spring to late fall. So you need to plan for plants that are going to bloom all of that time frame. So February, March to October. You want something blooming in every season. And if you had to kind of break it up, I'd say, 10% spring blooming, 40% summer blooming, 50% summer and fall blooming. The best choice, obviously, would be have native plants. That would be good for all of our native insects and hummingbirds. Here are 3 spring blooming California natives. Cianothus is a great choice. They come in white, blue, and lavender. And they grow everywhere from a ground cover to 20 feet tall. So there's something there for you in a color or in size that you can use in your garden. Ribes is a good plant to plant where you have, say, morning sun and afternoon shade. That would be the kind of place that ribes would like. They're very beautiful, and they also attract lots of insects. Hellebore is more of a shade plant, maybe a little sun in the morning, and they're also a native. Some more natives. Valerian. Valerian comes in white, pink, and red. It freely self-seeds. It's not aggressive, so you can easily pull whatever you don't want. The bees love it in the springtime. Snapdragons, believe it or not, are really natives. They've been hybridized, so the ones that you see here don't look quite like the natives do, but they are natives and they're a good choice. Cosmos is a good choice. It grows fast. It fills up an area quickly. It's a good plant for kids to grow because it grows quickly and it's very colorful. It's I always think of it as a very happy plant. It moves a lot, so it gives a lot of texture to the garden. Yarrow is also native. We have lots of native yarrows in California. White, pink, yellow, terracotta, lots of colors in between. They grow easily, and it's a good choice for butterflies because they have that flat top that butterflies like to sit on. Monarda, it's also called bee balm, so you obviously know why it's good. All kinds of lavender are good, although some are better than others. Some have more nectar than others do and are more attractive to bees. Some more native plants that you can plant in your garden. Echinacea, asters, Maynite salvia. These are all good choices for a pollinator garden. Some more. Catmint. Oh, catmint. They love catmint in my yard. Hummingbirds love it. Bees love it. Everybody loves it. It grows easily. It grows about 2 feet tall. And it really is, it's easy to take care of, and it's a good plant. Titonia is it's also called Mexican sunflower. It comes in yellow and orange. And depending on how much sun it gets, it can be 4 feet tall. So it's a good back of the border kind of plant. And again, it's flat, so the butterflies like it. And so do there's a lot of nectar, so you get all the rest of the pollinators as well. Good choice and a fun plant. Sticky monkey flower comes in lots of different colors, everything from white to yellow to red to kind of an orangey color. It's a native plant, grows easily here, doesn't need a lot of water. And I would say that it's a sturdy, and it doesn't grow very tall. It's probably about 2.5 feet tall, and it's a good choice. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about salvias and sages because I particularly like salvias and sages. These are all pictures of salvias, sages, same family that I have in my butterfly garden. I have Russian sage, grows about 2.5, 3 feet tall, blue flowers. I have hot lip salvia, one of my favorites. Chiapas sage is kind of a pink, it's a pinky lavender color. Mine are more pink than this one in this picture. They flower almost all year round in the Bay Area here. Jerusalem sage is a good choice. One thing I might say about salvias, they grow, you can pick salvias that come in all different colors, all different sizes, and all different seasons. So I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out which ones I want in which sizes and colors and heights to go in my butterfly garden. One thing that is really important is that you learn how to prune each of the different kinds of salvias or sages that you have. Some like to be cut back to the ground in the springtime. Some like to be cut like at 1 foot. Some like to be trimmed by half every year. So get to know your salvias and sages, but you'll find that if you prune them, you'll actually have much, much bigger, more vigorous plants. And for some of them, it forces them to spread out and send up more shoots from the bottom and make a nice big patch. Here are some more of the salvias that I have in my garden. Pineapple sage is a favorite. If you rub the leaves, they really, really do smell like pineapple. Another thing that I like about pineapple sage is it is a fall bloomer. So it'll be a nice big green plant during the summertime, good background for other plants in your garden. But then in the fall, it has these magnificent red flowers. Hummingbirds will be all over it. Bees will be all over it. And it really is, you know, a spark in the fall that's very nice to have. Hummingbird sage is a good plant. It doesn't grow very tall. The plant itself probably only grows 12 to 18 inches, and then it has the spikes of flowers coming up from there. Hummingbird sage is particularly good to grow under oaks, so where it can get a little morning sun creeping in under the branches, and then being protected in the hot part of the day from the sun is something that the hummingbird sage likes. It doesn't need a lot of water, so it doesn't need additional water. You can just, whatever you get in the wintertime is usually enough for hummingbird sage. Velvet sage is another good choice, and it's a nice shape, and it's a good filler in the garden. So those are some of my salvia choices. Another thing for your garden, you want to get their attention. Luckily, bees and hummingbirds and butterflies all kind of sort of like the same colors, but not exactly. So if you have a preference of you want more bees or more hummingbirds, then there's different colors that appeal to them that you can pick to go that direction. But most important in getting their attention is that you plant groups of flowers, 3 to 5 plants minimum, or a big plant like a sage that's going to cover a large area. Otherwise, they don't see it. If you have one little milkweed plant here or one little plant over there, you're not going to get them. You're not going to get what you want in your garden if you're looking for lots of bees and butterflies and hummingbirds. Broad swaths of color will lure in them. They can see them. They'll find them in your yard. This is a good example. You can see each of the plantings are large groupings of flowers. This is going to be very attractive, and it's something that the bees and butterflies, pollinators, are going to have no problem finding because they can easily see it. Okay. All right. One of the things that you should do is skip hybridized plants. Pretty double flowers are useless to your pollinators. They all have extra petals, that's why they're double, instead of anthers, which are the pollen producers that are attracting your pollinators. And most of them have very little or no nectar or pollen. It's been bred out of them when they bred in the extra petals. Let me show you a couple examples. Here's an old-fashioned cosmos. Notice that in the center here, you've got the anthers, and then the nectar is in the center. You also have a target. Notice how the plant has color around the center. This helps to direct the pollinators right into the plant. They can clearly see where they're going. They know where to find it. They know what to do. This is a hybridized cosmos, and you can see that you can't see the anthers or the center hardly of this cosmos at all. There's no target. There's no way for them to see what they're going for. And more than likely, what anthers are there have no pollen and they have no nectar. Both nectar and pollen are necessary to attract bees and butterflies. Here's a perfect zinnia. Again, you can see the anthers that surround the nectar in the middle. Good bullseye for those flowers. And again, it has a target around it. So it's easy for plants to see where they're going and what they're going to be getting. But then they decided that they couldn't leave well enough alone. They had to change them. So now it's going much smaller, not as easy to find. And then they gone. None. Nothing here. Nothing for your pollinators at all. Okay, but on the other side, if you want to attract more, plant herbs. All bees and butterflies, hummingbirds love herbs. You'll see them particularly in the spring. My rosemary is covered with bees this time of year when the flowers are coming out. Smells so good, and the garden smells good. And again, you can see that they really like this. Other choices: borage, thyme, parsley. Borage is one of my favorites, particularly because I have beehives. I have lots of borage out in my backyard, by my gardens, by my vegetable gardens. They're covered with bees all of the time, and they bloom for months and months and months. Another interesting fact that I just discovered is that borage replenishes its nectar very quickly. If a bee comes along and or a hummingbird and sips out the nectar from borage, within 2 minutes, that borage plant will replenish that nectar. So that's why there's so many bees on that plant, is because it always has lots of nectar. Now, I don't know for a lot of different plants how fast they replenish. It's going to be something I'm going to be doing some research on to see if I can find out some more information about which plants replenish, because obviously that's like a gold mine for plants. Parsley is interesting because parsley is a biennial. It produces leaves the first year, which is what you use in your cooking. And then the second year, it goes to seed or produces flowers, and then it goes to seed. So many people pull up their parsley in the wintertime because they know they aren't going to get any parsley leaves off of it for the next year. I leave mine to go to seed because the bees like it. And then after they flowered, after they're all done, then I pull out the parsley plants. Number 7, plant host plants. You know, maybe this should be number 2 or something after no pesticides. Milkweed is a good choice for nectar, in addition to being a host plant for monarchs. There are 16 varieties that are native to California. They come from many environments, and we have many climate choices. So they're milkweed. I want to encourage you to plant all kinds of host plants. If you know what kind of bees or what kind of butterflies you want to encourage in your garden, then you can plant those host plants. But in addition, I would also always grow milkweed. Here's what they look like, because most people don't even know what they look like. This is butterfly weed. It comes in red and orange. And it also comes in a yellow variety. The butterflies love it, obviously. This is the narrow leaf milkweed, also called Mexican leaf milkweed. The color is kind of a pinkish, a whitish lavender pink color, very pretty, very dainty. This is showy milkweed, speciosa. This is swamp milkweed, but never fear, it does not need a swamp. You don't have to have a real waterlogged area to grow it. And it's very pretty and very, smells real good. This is purple milkweed. And this is tropical milkweed. This one also comes in several different yellows and oranges and red. So as you can see, there's lots of choices in milkweed. Go with any color combination you have in your garden. And all they need is a sunny spot. Next, one of the things you need to do if you want a butterfly garden is to create a water source. Bees need a lot of water, particularly when it gets really hot in the summertime. They need it for cooling off the hive. They need it for recrystallizing the nectar. I'm sure you're all familiar, if you leave your honey for too long, it crystallizes in the jar. Well, they add a little bit of water back to that and they recrystallize it. They need it for digestion and to feed their babies. Butterflies need water and minerals, salts, particularly the males need it so they can function properly. And but they have a slightly different kind of requirement because obviously they can't land in water like birds can. So the water must be very shallow, puddles preferred, sand or small rocks are the best. And if you can add a layer of horse manure or steer manure on top of it, or maybe some rotting fruit, they'd just be delighted. Hummingbirds don't need a water source for drinking because they get it from their nectar, but they love a mister or a fountain spray. I can just stand with a hose and spray the water out in front of me, and on hot days, the hummingbirds will come and fly back and forth through the spray. They love it. So I've got to find a way to get a mister in my garden this year. Any bird baths that you have should be very shallow. They should not be slick on the bottom, and they should be filled with rocks. Even birds can't use a slick bottomed bird bath because they can't stand on it, and they won't use it, could be afraid of it. So the more shallow it is, more rough texture it is, or filled with rocks is what they need. Some examples. Here's just a small filled with marbles with just water on it. The bees can land on the marbles and then suck the water out from between them. By filling it with marbles or corks or rocks or something like that, you discourage mosquitoes. Here's someone who's used rocks in just a small bowl. Here's an innovative thought I thought was a waterer that they put rocks in, and you can see the bees obviously love it. This is a good choice for butterflies and for bees because they can land on the wet rocks or the gravel there, the sand or the gravel. The bigger rocks are great for butterflies to land on to warm up because they need to warm themselves up in the morning. This was an example from the butterflylady.com. She's got a great blog and has lots of different ideas. But you can see this works really easily, and obviously it doesn't attract mosquitoes. So you need a place in the sun for basking for butterflies and a walk in the muck. Now, maybe if you've been on a farm and you've seen maybe a small pond and it's mucky all around the edge, or you've got a someplace where the animals are getting water and maybe it leaks and so it's a little wet and mucky all around where the water is. Butterflies love that because they can get out there, they suck up all the minerals and salts that are in the water, and also it's obviously shallow, so they can get right in there. Here's another idea. Here's one that I would like to have somebody make for me someday because I think it's very pretty. And it's a good choice. It's got sand between the rocks and it's perfect and artistic for your garden. Okay, I'm going to show you two quick examples of how you can transform your yarn. This may be a good year to do it since we've got a drought. This was my oldest daughter's house when she first moved in. She had a whole front yard of 35 to 40-year-old junipers. They were huge. Didn't have to mow, didn't have to water very much, but it wasn't very attractive and certainly wasn't attracting any wildlife to her front yard. So we took those out. We had to use a pickup truck and drag them out of the ground, but got them out. And now in here, we've got hot lips, we've got salvias, we've got crepe myrtles. She has a lot of succulents. Down in front here, I planted lamb's ears, a lot of things that are very drought tolerant, very flowerful, and also blooms at different times during the year. So she was very happy with her garden after that. Then my second daughter got a house that had a whole front yard full of Bermuda grass. Again, pretty sterile looking yard and not very inviting, I didn't think. She didn't think. So this is what we did. We put in the left of the sidewalk, we put in 3 large salvias. These are hot lips. Then in front of them, we put in catmint, and around the edge, we put in lamb's ears on this side of the sidewalk. This is about 3 or 4 months after we planted everything. The hot lips were planted from 1-gallon cans. I had 3 1-gallon cans here. I think all of the catmint were from 4-inch pots, and the salvias were just from starts taken from my garden. And you can see how quickly they took over. This is all on drip, and it grew very well. Now, I didn't trim back these salvias for the first 2 years they were there. I didn't really know much about pruning salvias, so I was afraid to prune them because I was afraid they wouldn't come back. Well, by the end of last summer, these hot lips were about 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. They were huge, and they were covered every day in hummingbirds and bees. They were just there all the time. It was really, really lovely. So they took off really fast. I did cut them back this winter though, and they're already starting, they're almost this size again. And it's only been a couple of months. This is what the other half of the sidewalk looked like later on in that summer. The red is all sticky monkey flower in the red, and you can see that bloomed really well. And that was, again, a first year blooming of those plants. So you can get an instant redo of your garden fairly quickly by just picking, again, a few plants. I didn't plant a lot of different things, but I wanted a lot of color that would attract the pollinators and they could see them clearly. Okay. I'd like to thank the San Mateo County Library System and Jessica for hosting us today so that we can bring this information to our community. And I'd also like to invite you to ask us a question. If you have other questions, you can call our helpline. You can also email questions to us. And our helpline offices are currently closed due to the pandemic. I'm hopeful that they'll open again soon. We have offices in Half Moon Bay, San Francisco, and Redwood City that have regular hours if you want to bring in samples, etc. Otherwise, you can call or email us with questions. Send us pictures if you have some specific question. You can also visit our website where we have lots of information on what to grow now, helpful tips for vegetable gardening, all kinds of information that you can follow. Also, I'd like to mention that if you're interested, particularly for butterflies, but also for pollinators, there's a number of Facebook groups that you can join. There's one called Pollinator Power, and they talk a lot about what kind of plants attract what kind of pollinators, and all over the country. There's lots of people on their advice. They tell you where to buy things. Very helpful, lots of pictures every day. And then there's 3 Facebook groups that I follow for butterflies. One is called Beautiful Monarchs. Again, if you're interested in raising monarchs inside your house after you collect eggs and raise them in your house, this group is very, very helpful with that. They tell you everything you need to know and are helpful. There's another site called Simply Swallowtails that obviously specializes in swallowtails. And there's also the California Butterfly Lady. And so these are all other resources where you can get information about specifically how to raise these butterflies. So thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has now.
So Cindy, I've been tracking the questions in the chat, and so I can ask them to you. And please, everybody, while I do that, put any other questions in the chat and we'll get to those. So, all right, so Cindy, the first question is, could you discuss the growing conditions for milkweed? I have a number of seedlings in my vegetable beds and want to move them.
Oh, wonderful. Well, first of all, they like full sun. And that probably is the most important thing, is full sun. If you've got them growing now and you want to transplant them, I would do it right away. They put down a real deep taproot. So if you wait too long, you're not going to be able to get all that taproot out. And when you do dig them up, dig out as much as you can around them so you get as much of the plant roots out as you can when you transplant them. But you're good to go if you've already got some. Or if you can get seed, you can plant them in the fall in your garden. They'll overwinter and then they'll come up in the springtime. Any other questions? Next. Jessica, did we freeze?
All right, let's see. So then the next question is, we have a sunny deck, but no yard. Can milkweed be grown in containers?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. But so can a lot of these nectar plants, but definitely you can grow milkweed in containers. Yes.
And somebody's asking, where can you buy milkweed? I don't know if you answered it before. It was kind of cutting in and out for a second there when you were, you might have mentioned it.
Milkweed is harder to find. You can find it, and mainly if you look for native plant gardens. I just bought some narrow leaf milkweed at Bay Natives in San Francisco. Other native plants have them, and I'm sure that you can order them through most nurseries, different varieties. And also there's lots of places where you can buy seed.
Great. Let's see. Is it too late to grow milkweed this season?
If you grow it from plants that are already growing, if you buy plants to put in your garden, it's not too late. It's getting a little late for growing from seed. Some of the seeds need to be put into cold storage, either a refrigerator or a freezer, for 6 weeks or so before you plant them. So those I typically put in cold storage after Thanksgiving, and then take them out after the new year and start them at that point in time.
All right. Next question is, does Cianothus host tiger swallowtail since they like lilac? And if so, can Cianothus be raised in containers?
I guess Cianothus could be raised in containers. Most of them are pretty good size, although, as I said, there are some that are ground covers. I don't know that they're a host plant they're not a host plant for swallowtails, but they are a nectar plant, and they're a very early blooming nectar plant. So they certainly would attract any kind of butterfly to your garden.
All right. Let's see. We have a question. I think you might have covered this already. It's about, do you have tips on how to maximize friendliness to native pollinators for those of us who are working with smaller outdoor spaces? I think you covered that pretty well. Is there anything additional you want to add to that?
No, I think you want to concentrate on a couple of plants rather than, and something like a sage, which a lot of them grow 2 feet by 3 feet tall and wide. So they're a pretty good anchor plant, if you will. And then you could plant other annuals and echinacea, things like that around them.
All right. Let's see. Next question is, which types of lavender have the most nectar?
That's a good question. I'm thinking that some of the ones like some of the English lavenders and some of the French lavenders probably have the most nectar, but that's one of the things I'm going to be doing some research on, because I think that's a good question.
All right. Let's see. So the next question is, which flowers or plants that you mentioned are toxic to dogs?
Oh gosh, I mentioned so many plants. I wouldn't know. You'd have to check them individually, but it's real easy to find that information online these days. You just put is Cianothus or is echinacea toxic to animals? And interesting enough, some of them are toxic to cats, but not dogs, dogs, but not cats. So it kind of depends on what kind of animals you have. Oh, or some of it might be toxic to cows, or goats and not dogs. So it kind of depends.
All right. I guess it'll vary from plant to plant. All right. So the next question is, I've heard it's a recommended 10 square feet of the same plant species to attract pollinators. Is that true?
10 feet would be wonderful, but you got to have a big garden to be able to have 10 square feet of the same plant. That's why I suggested at least 3 to 5 of the same plant. And most plants need to be planted, you know, a foot or so apart. So we're probably talking 6 to 5 feet anyway, of an area that would be the same kind of plant. Yes.
All right. What about commercially purchased bee houses? I've heard that they have chemicals that are bad for bees, and if so, can bee houses be made at home?
And absolutely, you can make your own bee houses. Some of those are looking for plants, actually, like the inside of bamboo or something like that, that's pithy and then is hollow when it dries. That would give them a place to go into. You saw the picture I had of a bee that was carrying a leaf into a pithy stem. So absolutely, you can make something like that yourself. I've seen people, excuse me, who've gotten softwood and have drilled a number of holes in them, and then that encourages the bees to drill in there further and create their own spot. Again, I would put it someplace that's sunny, that gets probably morning sun, and that's going to be something that'll, because they wake up in the morning and get going, and I think that would be advantageous for them.
All right. Let's see. Next question. So, like, it's kind of, there were 2 questions that were kind of related. So the first one is California Native Plant Society. They discourage planting tropical milkweed, which is non-native to California, for monarchs. It is actually one of the contributing plants in the reduction of monarchs. If you must plant tropical milkweed, they say to cut them at the base in the fall to keep the plant from flowering during the hibernation period. Is that true? Is that something people should take into consideration?
Okay, in my opinion, any milkweed is good milkweed for monarchs. We don't have enough milkweed as it is. So I recommend we plant any and all milkweed that we possibly can. Now, the question with the tropical is that it does not die. The tropical milkweed does not dry down in the wintertime like some of the other milkweeds do. Milkweeds get a disease on them called OE that is not good, actually very bad for monarchs. So tropical milkweed will host that, and because they overwinter, it'll carry it into the next year. So that's why they recommend that you cut tropical milkweed to the ground and then throw that away, because then you'll eliminate that disease completely from that plant for the next year. It has nothing to do with the hibernation, because when it's time for monarchs to migrate, they will migrate. They're bound by the sun, the light. They know when it's time for them to migrate, and the milkweed isn't going to keep them there. If that were the case, then monarchs that were migrating from Canada to Mexico would never make it to Mexico, because they'd stop off in Texas because there's milkweed there. It isn't the case. They'll keep migrating to wherever they're going to migrate to, and grow all the milkweed you can.
All right. And this is kind of related, that there's possibly controversy regarding milkweed on the coast, and someone remembers reading that milkweed shouldn't be planted anywhere within 10 miles of the coast, and they think that only the narrow leaf milkweed, A. fascicularis, is native to San Mateo County.
Yes, narrow leaf is native to San Mateo County. Yes, it is. Some of the others are native to other parts of California that can also be grown, that I showed here. But that is true. The narrow leaf is the one that's native to San Mateo County. That's the one I have growing in my garden right now. But I don't think, again, I don't think there's a problem with growing within 10 miles of the coast, because they're going to migrate if they're going to migrate. They're not going to stop here to eat. The fourth generation, the ones that migrate, don't even mate after they come out of the chrysalis. They start flying immediately to wherever they're migrating to, and they don't mate. They only stop to eat what they need for fuel on their way to wherever there is going. And then they all hang together in the trees or wherever they're overwintering. And then in the spring, they mate and take off from there. So the fourth generation is a very unusual generation because it can fly so far. Some of those, the Midwest and East Coast monarchs fly 3,000 miles to get to their overwintering site, whereas their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents didn't fly that far between the generations. So it's a very unusual, they're actually usually a little larger than previous generations, so they can endure and fly that far.
All right. Looks like, so the last question is, how do you deal with the milkweed seed pods?
Well, it depends on whether you want more milkweed. One thing to do is to let them begin to dry on the plant, cut them off, put them in a paper bag, and then tie the paper bag tightly shut and leave them in there for a while. And they will, as they dry, they'll split on their own and release all of those. And then you can shake them, and then the seeds will come loose from the milkweed itself. Otherwise, they're kind of like dandelions. They'll float all over the place, which is a good thing if that's what you want them to do. You can also take them out to, fields and places like that and shake them out there and encourage them to grow like they used to grow along the sides of the road, ditches, places like that. But I actually had one that I had for a class that I was teaching, and I had put it in a container. And then when I came back a couple months later for another class, it had split inside of the container because it had dried in there. So that's how I know that works. Now, if you're afraid that they're going to split on the plant itself, you can buy little silk bags that they buy for different crafts and things. So you can put it over the milkweed, tie it, and then it'll stay in there and not float off when it dries out.
All right. And looks like the last couple of questions are for me, asking about if there will be a way to hear this talk again. And yes, so today's talk was recorded, and I will send out the link to the recording to everybody who signed up. That might take a couple of days for that to be ready, but I will send that out. And I am putting a survey in the chat that we'd appreciate if you fill that out to let us know how we did and to give the county libraries ideas for new programs. So, all right. And so I don't see any new questions for Cindy.
Okay, just a note here, I'll be back in July to teach a class with one of my fellow master gardeners on backyard chicken keeping. So if you're interested in backyard chickens, we're going to have a class here in July, and send your friends over too.
Yes, that's going to be in July. And I will send out the link to sign up for that along with the recording link. So please do join us for that. And you can check out other events on smcl.org. And I believe that's everything for today. Everybody have a great night, and I will close out the meeting shortly. So thank you so much, Cindy. This is a great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.